And we're back for more drawing fun. Now, one of the reasons after we drew the unicorn, I didn't go on to draw another horse mythical beast like a Pegasus, was I was saving the wings for later. And you may have guessed, we're going to do a Griffin. Now, Griffin, I think, stems from European mythology. I could be wrong on that, but it's what most of the stories I've heard. It looks more complicated than it is. It's simply just a cross between an eagle and a lion, like that simple. But it's the head and the claws and the wings of an eagle on the back half of a lion's body. This is a drawing I did a long time ago of a griffin. I kind of thought it was cute, you know, taking a big ferocious beast and putting him in a nervous situation. I was looking for another one I did years ago. I couldn't find it. I think I did it on someone's birthday card, and they own it now. But I had that one watercolored and it looked real nice. But anyway, this is one I did a while back. But we're going to do something a little bit along the lines of this. I want to give you a preview first to kind of know what we're shooting for. I'm not going to do the same pose. He's not going to be playing cards. But this general cartoony look. We'll probably do his wings out. Maybe do a couple drawings. We're going to look at the construction of wings. Because that's kind of the fun part. I kind of cheated it here and had him sitting on them, whereas we didn't have to draw all the wings. But this is the feel. I like the idea of having something, this big, majestic, ferocious beast, and making him a little nervous at the same time. And it's not a true eagle's head. They generally have those feathers that flop up in the back, almost like an osprey. But we'll get into that. So let's look at just the construction of wings first before we get too deep into how to put them on on an animal. Wings aren't just they're hinged. They're almost like our arm. They attach at a shoulder. They have this bend here, and even if you can think of the end of the top part of the wing and the extension of your fingers as feathers. It's not exactly like that. The anatomy is different. I mean, it's more like a bat wing, but it still has the same basic shape and most of the same basic bones. To draw things out, let's look at it like this. If you have a bird body, and it doesn't matter the bird, yes, all the wings are different sizes, different shapes, they do different jobs. You know, the wings of a condor are very broad and long for soaring, and the wings of a swallow are short and fast and for darting in and out. But they still have the same basic construction. If this is the side view of the body, very aerodynamic, and the wing is raised, it comes off the shoulder here, sorry, and it has that little crook of an elbow, and it has that. And they'll fold up too. That's when they fold up. That top part that we see very often is basically the bird's wrist. And again, this is a cartoon version, but there are two groups of feathers. They're the primary feathers that come out really long like this, and the secondary feathers. I believe there's another layer too. I've forgotten. You can ask Aaron about that. But off this you have these long, beautiful, majestic feathers. Even on small birds, they look really beautiful. And they get a little tighter and closer together here. And then you have this other layer here. Now I'm just doing them real fast. And like I said, every bird is slightly different. Basically the same construction though. Now if that wing folds up, again, our bird body, it's still the shoulder is there, and it folds up, and that part that we see like that, or whenever you draw if you're drawing a cartoony bird, and you draw the wing like this, that little part that comes up is the wrist. Remember, the shoulder's back here, and it folds up and over itself, and it folds very tightly. And then you see the backs of those, these feathers, the backside as it's folded up. That's kind of like a symbol for a bird. So you see the those feathers that spread out while they're flying group together real tight while they've got them folded up against their side. Now we don't have to worry about the tail in this drawing because we're going to draw a lion's tail. When you're drawing wings at an angle, the bird's at an angle and the wings are turned, then it gets really tricky because you've got perspective to deal with. Some wings are coming at you and the other wing is going back, and you have to make them feel like they're all, kind of one, like an airplane wing, straight across. But we'll get into that while we're drawing the Griffin. But this is what we're going to be looking at. If you can, there's a front side, and obviously the back side. When it's, we'll see that over here. And it'll be smaller, and then we'll get into how to make that look majestic in just a minute. So I hope you have gotten the general gist of this. I'll put some more notes in a handout to go along with this so you can study it a little more closely. You can fold that page over. Now let's have fun with a Griffin. Now, I'm going to work really lightly as always, and the first one we're going to draw just not flying. Let's start something a little bit simpler, and then we'll do a second drawing with him in motion. The first one we'll keep in pencil. We'll ink the second one. All right. And I'm going to have just a noble pose. Start with his head. There. Circle and going down to his neck. His neck's going to be turned backwards. And a lion body. This is almost, we're going to be doing kind of an academic pose here, just so you can see all the parts and get everything and understand how all the anatomy fits together. And just like the horse that we drew, they have the shoulder blades. Lions have their shoulder blades on the side. Now this gets a little tricky here because it's not lion shoulder blades. They have the front feet are eagle claws. So we've got to figure out how much is going to be lion and how much is going to be eagle in this part. This is that dividing line. And bird's legs, let's go back to the wing drawing. They work very similar to animal legs, at least the back legs. Even if it's easier to see on something like an ostrich, where you've got this big body and you've got the thigh up here, which is usually covered in feathers, and then you've got their lower leg, and just like we see on what we thought on a horse that looks like the backwards knees, like no, that's their heel, and then it goes down to their feet and their talons. And up here, covered with feathers, it's harder to see because it is all covered, and wrapped up in there is the thigh, and this is their knee, and that's their heel. This is the drumstick, in your Thanksgiving turkey. So, but that's the back leg. And here, we're drawing a Griffin. We're going to be putting the back legs of an eagle, the legs of an eagle, which are simply the hind limbs, on the front. So we're kind of have to fudge some anatomy. So I'm going to put kind of a lion shoulder and then let it transform into an eagle foot. And I like big, powerful talons, bigger than what an eagle probably would be. I'm roughing this out. We'll get into the details later, but like these big knuckles and big talons, and have his other leg out here. That's where his heel or elbow, which depending on whether this is the front leg or back leg, right there. And this talon is going to be stretched out a little bit, like that, like it's touching the ground, like he's taking mid-step, which means I made this one just a little short. I've seen lots of paintings of griffins and drawings, and I really like their design, but as I think about the story and the origin, I'm not sure I know much about them. I know people spell the word different ways. You can spell it with a Y and a PH, Gryphon, or Griffen, which is, is a common last name. Isn't there a griffin on the flag of the country of Wales? Or is that a dragon? I have forgotten. Forgive me, all you people from the United Kingdom. Well, at least the Welsh part of the United Kingdom, for forgetting your flag. Okay, the back legs are a lion, and it works very similar to a horse. You've got your knee here, your heel here, and then going back to, but they obviously don't have hooves. They're walking on like the basically what you would, when you stand on your toes, that padded part of your foot, that is a lion's paw. The same bones go in there. So you have this, not a real pronounced joint, but there's a little bit of a bend there, because this is the heel, and then goes like that, and we'll have the other leg. It's more pronounced when their legs are stretched out back. You really see that in like a German Shepherd when they stand real, even though they're not a cat, but when they stand in their proper pose for their kennel club photos. And yeah, get that lion tail in here. I think I could probably make that neck bigger. I can maybe fluff out those feathers. Now feathers kind of fluff and lay down similar to fish scales, but they're much looser, obviously. Birds can really use those for insulation by fluffing them up and getting a lot of air in there. Or they can lay them down flat to get more streamline. Now we can let those feathers kind of trail off down here like a lion's mane would do. I like, keep a big eagle eye, very expressive. I'm putting that little serrated bit of the beak in here. Look better looking forward, looking right or left. What do you think? No, looking forward's better. Too big of a pupil. When pupils get really big, characters start looking real cute and losing their edge, and I want them to look very serious. Start looking like a cat who's trying to be forgiven for peeing on the carpet. Was it me, really? There. There, and we have the basic anatomy of a griffin. So, back to feathers. I'm going to say you can use the texture of the feathers, the lines here, and just following a curve like this. If you can see where I'm doing this light line. Now I had this in my head when I was doing it, just kind of after drawing a lot of these, you just get in the habit of it. And if you put those feathers in, a curved arrangement, it adds some volume and some curvature and some depth to your drawing. Like I said, I'm not going to clean this up with ink, but I'm going to go a little bit tighter with pencil, just to clarify the lesson a little bit more. Oh, we have to do the wings. I almost forgot his wings. but that's getting, and I'll tie down the anatomy on those claws and talons a bit more too, because that's the tricky part. And if I just leave it all messy and scumbly, and you're not going to learn so much. So I got these feathers, and I find it, I have to work against my nature to make sure I don't make them too even, and make a little bit of a random arrangement here. There. I'm not drawing the feathers all the way across, even though this isn't a finished drawing. This will be a sketch. As I'm putting more of the texture on one side, and just like I did with the scales on the mermaid tail or the grass underneath the unicorn, I'm using the texture and the grouping of it and drawing on one side to create a bit of a shadow. Not a true shadow, but it just puts more lines over here so it looks darker because there's more pencil work. So you get the effect of a shadow without actually shading. It's kind of a not quite cross-hatching. Okay, right here, where the feathers are going to leave off of the top part of his leg there, we've got like a big giant chicken leg, kind of scaly. And now I draw the claws very much like just human thumbs like here, and then drawing the claws almost like fingers, but real bony fingers. If you have my lesson on drawing people, there's a handout on drawing, there's a printout I should say, there's a printout on drawing hands, and I did a little bit on drawing older hands and making them kind of knuckly and gnarly. Basically what I'm doing here, just really pronouncing the bumpiness of the knuckles, keeping the inside a bit smooth. And we're not going to see all those claws are behind each other, but they have a little bit of a shadow here. Maybe just a little, so it's easier to tell that his foot is not on the ground, just kind of touching his toe. Oh, you can't see that. Or he's just kind of reaching out and touching his toe to the floor like he's in mid-step. And don't worry, we are going to get to the wings. A griffin's not a griffin without wings. Put some more feathers around this leg here. Make sure I don't make this claw too much bigger than the other one. Even small birds have these wicked looking talons when you get close to them. I think the only birds that don't are like waterfowl, like ducks and flamingos. They've got, look like they're wearing scuba flippers. But even little sparrows have tiny talons. Toes back here. You can do 3 or 4. I went ahead and put the 4th ones in there. Okay. Now we get to do the wings, the fun part. Is that clear? Yeah, you can see that just fine. I'm going to be kind of not all the way folded, not all the way up, kind of mid-fold, so it doesn't, I'll run out of room if I put it all up here, and if I have it folded, we're going to lose some of the funness of it. So I'm going to have, we're going to see both sides of the wing. A little bit of the underside here, and then it's folded over toward us. So I'm going to pull out my trusty eraser and erase some of the lion bits here. So it kind of cups over like a shallow clam shell. Like that. These feathers are all going to be grouped. We'll see a little bit of the feathering on that side. And a little bit of shadow here. So if we could see through this, of course we see the shoulder here, the elbow would be behind this somewhere, and then up here is the wrist. But it's folded over there. Should we see a little bit of the other wing too? Actually, the wing looks a little bit small. I should make that bigger. He's a big griffin. He needs more wings to lift that huge body off the ground. Yeah. The other wing, I just see a little bit of it back here. Part of me wants to put it up like unfurled a little bit on this side, but I think it's a little off balance. So we'll just keep it like that. Again, this is there's not really a hard line, if you've noticed, with birds where their beaks attached to their face, but I'm putting this pretty stark dividing line here. It kind of helps the severity of it, giving a very serious look. Gives them like that sharp line we have in the under our cheek. There. So now, big tuft of fur here. You've got the general idea of how a griffin is built. All right. You get that? You got how different parts of the body are fitting, different part of the different animals are fitting together, how we've got part lion, part eagle, and where that borderline gets a little blurry and how we force them to fit together. Griffins are very similar to sphinxes too, only sphinxes have a lion's body and a woman's head. Although I think the Great Sphinx might be a man's head, the one in Egypt. Sphinxes are in both Egyptian and Greek mythology. We're not going to be drawing a sphinx, I just got thinking about him. Oh, but the Egyptians have some great creatures. A lot of their gods are just human bodies. They're like a minotaur. They have different, like one has a falcon head, one has, I've forgotten all their names. I think Anubis is the one with the jackal head. Those would be fun. Next lesson. Next series of lessons. Okay, now let's draw another griffin in flight. Let's have some real fun with him. Let's see how much we can turn him around and really get some action and some anatomy and show off things. Okay, so he's going to have to be a little bit smaller on this so we can have all the wings spread out. Let's see. I'm going to have him mid-flight. We're going to have his body down here. And just to give you some geometry, just showing that's this midline. It's coming toward us. And one leg is going to be down, one leg is going to be up, and these talons are going to be spread out like that. Like you said, you can get the idea. This is going to be real rough right now. We'll tie it down later. This is just to get the pose. So 3 toes and 1 back toe. This head comes off that way. Is that too big? Yeah. I've noticed, maybe you have too, drawing a profile is a lot easier than drawing a 3/4 shot. So the head is slightly turned. So we're seeing a little bit of the eye on the other side. You can even have his mouth open in this one. There. And again, think of when we start putting details in, think of this, the neck as a rounded shape. It's like a cylinder-ish that's been kind of squished. It's not a perfect cylinder. Somewhere between a cylinder and a cone that's been a little bit squished. But think of these contour lines that run around this way, and we put on the feathers in, we'll follow that same curvature, and it'll give a lot more depth and dimension. You do a cartoon drawing, and this claw is going to be bunched up a little bit. Chest looks a little small. Let's puff that out a little bit more. Now, this reminds me, you might want somebody to look up. There was an artist back in the, I think he was in the 1920s, 1910s, maybe even earlier than that. A guy named T.J. Sullivant, Sullivant. He was an American cartoonist and had some of the best drawings of animals. If you can find, you can look him up. A lot of his drawings are online. Books of his are very rare and very expensive. I almost drew a bird foot back here. But he's just, even though it's a very, Sullivan's work is very old style, just some incredible design work on animals. I love his animals. Very, very fun. You can tell he influenced a lot of other artists, the more recent history, people I grew up with, that were my heroes, like that were when I was younger, people like Jack Davis and Wallace Tripp. Other people are good to look up. I'm not going to draw his tail right now because it's going to get covered up with the wings. So let's put a wing in here. And get that in there. There, that's going to look better like that. Okay, right off the shoulder. Now that's weird when you have a creature that's got 6 limbs, basically, because a bird has 2 wings, 2 legs, so there's still a 4-legged creature like any mammal. Bird. I know birds aren't mammals. I'm saying they're like mammals in that they have 4 limbs. But then when you get into creatures like this, all of a sudden you've got extra limbs. It's like when we draw a centaur, all of a sudden they've got 4 legs plus 2 arms, and they've got 2 rib cages, and things get a little dicey. Okay, I don't like that wing. I'm going to draw that one over again, so I hope you haven't followed along too closely. I'll make you erase too. But this one's going to be interesting. We've the arm part, before we get to the feather bit, where the shoulder comes out, it's from this angle. It's going to look pretty much like a curve. And from here, we're going to see the back side of the primary feathers, and then right around here, it's going to have this twist to it, and we'll see the underside of the wing on that side. When you're drawing something like this, sometimes it really helps to go look up photos of large birds like condors and eagles and things like that. You can get some really beautiful poses and of the wings and put those on your Griffin drawings. So I want to draw his wing up, but I don't have enough room on the paper. What am I going to do here? How's this going to look natural? I do it this way maybe? Actually, it'll look better going up like this. I'm just going to have it go off the paper. My lack of planning. So we have this coming off the shoulder, that elbow, and then going up because I should have drawn him this way within the, a vertical or a portrait thing, but it doesn't fit on the screen as well. So everything I'm drawing I try to do horizontally, or what is commonly referred to as landscape mode. Okay, now I can the tail coming off like that. That back leg looks a little small, doesn't it? I know it's foreshortened, but still. There. There. I'm trying to figure out what the back legs would be doing since they're not really running. There. That's a good start. I'm going to knot back all this scribble, and we're going to tie him down just a little bit. So get my handy dandy kneaded eraser turned into an erasing snake. His expression looks a little worried. I don't want him to look worried. I want him to look determined. So I need to fix that. We went over expressions a lot in my last two lessons, so we'll just touch on them a little bit. Of course, we'll really erase a lot of this after we ink too. I'm not going to get too detailed. I like to save a lot of the details for when I am inking. Because if I do all my thought process first, I lose a lot of the freshness when I'm tying it down later. So I'm going to kind of hit a happy medium here. I just don't want any guesswork. There, I have a little tongue in there. Like a little triangle Donald Duck tongue. And see how I'm following, not perfectly, I don't want it to look like stripes or perfect layers, but just trying to follow the curvature of the neck when I'm putting in the again, just like before I did in the last sketch, putting a lot more groupings down here at the bottom, and it kind of creates its own version of cross-hatching. When I'm inking, I can even make those lines thicker with my brush pen. And you can use the curvature of these scaly legs. I don't know if we can quite get that, but making those lines wrap around it to aid in the look of dimension. See if you can tell what I'm doing here. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. You can cut into this. You can see what I'm doing here with the feet. Again, keeping the underside of the toe fairly smooth, and the top of it is where I'm putting all the bumps and the knuckles. Yeah, this one's got to be turned the other way. It's almost coming right at us. And then the little toe, that back toe. Now, if you wanted to change things up a little bit and put, I don't know, more feathers, further down his body or whatever, that's all up in the air. There's no like rules on, say, oh, griffins don't look like that. If your griffin looks like that, it does. I've seen a lot of people take their own personal variations on it, on designs, on mythical creatures, and they're usually really fun. Like, oh, I never thought of doing it that way before. Now these talons are all, bunched up. Whenever I'm drawing birds, especially ravens, I'll usually have one claw, one foot out and the other kind of bunched up, like they're reaching for something. It just feels like there's more action if each limb is doing something slightly different. It feels like it's in motion, not just posed. Almost forgot. I'm going to put a little feather right here coming off where the wrist is. Aids to the authenticity. I almost forgot the word was of it. Now we start inking on this. I'm going to have fun showing some techniques with ink to create shading and shadows, dropping in some heavy blacks. A little more of a comic book technique, but it's a fun way to, again, create some depth and dimension in your characters. Even though they are just cartoons, I like to make sure that everything has a certain amount of believability to it. There. Okay, now I've done all that work putting in those pencil lines. I'm going to erase most of it so we can ink it. So now that I've done all these pencil lines, I worked so hard on them. It's still rather sketchy. I didn't go to extremes. I'm going to knock it back with my eraser so I can Put some nice, dark, pretty ink lines over it. Now, if I were doing a lot of inking, and like working on a comic book or a comic strip or something, I would consider drawing in blue pencil, because it's easier to take out the blue lines when you're scanning it, or if you're using an old style like a Xerox camera or a photostat camera, and the blue lines just disappear. But just so you guys can see it better, working in this dark pencil so it shows up better on screen. If I did a blue pencil, it'd be squinting at your screen going, what's he drawing? What's he drawing? Okay, that's a good place to leave this for some inking. And you guessed it, I'm going to be using my Pentel pocket brush. That one is good for larger areas. This one's losing its tip a little bit. It's an older one. This one, that one's still sharp. They do wear out after a while. I'm going to start left and work right, and unless you're left-handed, start right and work left, so you don't drag your hands through wet ink. And I know I say that every time, but just in case somebody who's watching this hasn't seen my other lessons. I'd hate for that one person to be, hey, you never told me about that. Now here I can put a little dry brush technique. Let me zoom in a little bit more. There. So here you can see I put a little bit of dry brush technique under the eyes. I'm going to put a few more wrinkles in here. If I can barely touch the page and make a quick sweep, the texture of the paper comes into play and it breaks up the line a little bit. And I love that real loose brush feel. If you're going to be using a brush, let it play its part. There, put in that little serration point. That's something that birds of prey have, that little point midway back in their beaks. Helps them cut through meat. Put a little, I didn't draw his nostril in the pencil line, but I think I will. Something else I didn't do, I'm not sure I'm going to. Usually birds have that little wrap of skin over their into the beak. It's really pronounced on hookbills, things like parrots and parakeets. You don't notice it so much on birds of prey, but still it's there. I'm thinking about putting another line, but too many lines. It won't look cartoony anymore. I'll start getting into too realistic. And Griffins are great too, because I know people love drawing eagles and they love drawing lions. They're both such symbols of power. Like, here's the best of both worlds. The eagle lion. And if your name happens to be Griffin, you should be drawing these a lot, putting them on your own t-shirts. This is what part of the technique I was wanting to show you. I'm going to put some really dark shadows in places, starting right here under his neck, just blackening in those feathers. And then letting the feather lines get a little lighter as we go around. And it really emphasizes the shape of it. I mean, the roundness of it, like, you know, because there's going to be a shadow here, and just leaving the edges of the feathers in places to be for a little bit of definition, for some texture. In fact, you can use, here's my watercolor scrapboard, you can use your brush, if you can just kind of dab it like that, you can create some beautiful feather shapes, or leaves or scales. Learn how to use the shape of the brush to create texture. So that's what I'm doing a little bit in here, just using. It takes some practice. Again, use on a scrap, put on a scrap piece of paper. There. And let those thick lines kind of taper off into just the feathers up on the top, just lighter and lighter lines. There. Maybe. The technique is called dropping in your blacks. It's for comic books especially, you see that a lot. When people want to, especially if like a graphic novel that they're not going to put color in. But of course, it really makes a black and white artwork that much bolder. Of course, you do it in color too, but just to make a point. There, that looks good. And yours are going to look a little bit different because some of this is just me playing around, and there's a certain randomization to it. I want to go do his foot, but I'm going to do the top part here and work down, so if I don't, again, if I work at the bottom and then go up, I'm going to put my hand through wet ink. So let's do this just a little bit. Let's do this far wing now. I'm going to try and do one smooth line, stopping at that feather. There. And again, the underneath side of the wing here, I'm going to do that in all black because it's in the shadow. And I'm going to even use just flick my brush out to get a little dry brush technique for those feathers. There. Now here you'll see that I kept that line away from that little feather that's sticking up. I didn't go right up to it. This line is so near the tip of that feather it was going to create a bad tangent, and I didn't want it was going to look a little weird. So I left some space around it, opened it up. It's a minor thing, but if I did it the other way, it would just like, ew, the drawing's bad because you did that one thing. Tangents are sneaky things. They sneak into every drawing if you're not careful. You just have to learn to keep an eye out for them. And once you learn to catch them and get rid of them, you will get rid of an enemy. Moment here and do a little feather lesson. Okay. Now, let me take a moment and talk about feathers for a moment. Let's take a break from this wing. A feather, especially ones on these wings, there are all kinds of feathers. There are soft down feathers. The feathers on the chest of a bird are soft and thin, but the flight feathers and the tail feathers have that real thick vein that runs down the middle. I'm sure you've seen it if you've held like a goose feather. And then, of course, right off of that, the feathers. Let's pause here for just a moment while we're drawing this wing. I want to talk a little bit about feathers. This is a pelican feather. A friend of mine gave this to me. But some things I want you to notice about it. It's not too dissimilar from an eagle feather or a goose feather. But it's got this long vein, the hard part that's in the middle, when this is the end of it that would go inside the bird. The fallout like hair, I doubt this probably just fell out of a pelican. Nobody hurt the pelican. But this vein, the feathery parts, this is a wing feather, by the way. You can tell that because the vein is off-centered. If it were a feather from the chest of a bird, this would be more centered, and the feathery parts, forgot the names of everything, would be a little softer. This is firmer for cupping air and lifting a heavy bird off the ground. But these wing feathers, it's thinner. It's off center. This is a thinner row of little feathers on this side, and thicker on this side. And if you get real close, you can see how occasionally they'll part like this. And there's little barbs on there. You can get them to stick back together. And that's what birds do when they're preening. It's almost like a Ziploc bag, with the barbs attached with each other. Up here, there's overlapped a little bit. But that's the basic look of a feather. The closer you get, there's a lot of detail, but there's ways that we can indicate detail and simplify it and exaggerate it, which is cartooning. So I will put my pelican feather over there and go back to this drawing of a feather. See, I have my vein going right down the middle, and when you draw the fluffy parts, it's good to put just like a couple of little gaps in there, and then you can draw the loose feather, the downy bit at the end down here. It's not, you don't see it so much on this one, but sometimes there's like this little downy fluff down at the end of the feather. Of course, while it's in the bird, we won't see that. But that's a way to do a shorthand version, like a representation of a wing feather. Tail feathers are often a little, sometimes flatter, rounder on the end. They're not as pointed. Little downy feathers, which you'd have on the chest or the head of a bird, are short and little and softer, so they have more of that little fluff near the end of the vein. So that's what we're going for here. So back to our Griffin. I'm trying to recreate some of that without trying to make it too busy. Maybe just put a few little lines here up on that first feather. There. Now I'll get our other wing that ran off the page. I'm pretty sure this feather that sticks off the end where the wrist is has a name, because I've seen it on so many birds. And I just have lost, my memory has forgotten so many bits of bird anatomy. I do remember I was talking about that skin across the beak. That's called the cere, C-E-R-E. And in parakeets, you can tell if your parakeet is a boy or a girl by the color of the cere. I've forgotten what each color means, what color is a boy and girl, but if you get a book on parakeets, you'll find out. That's what I did. Yeah, I had a parakeet when I was like in 5th grade or so. His name was Sparky. Okay, Now I'm not going to put a lot of blacks on the underneath side of this wing because it's facing us. It's kind of catching some light. I might do a little bit, make these lines thicker when I get into these secondary and tertiary feathers. giving some variance here. Because if I make them all even, it's going to be kind of weird looking. It's more fun if we can randomize it a bit. And if you make a mistake, just put in more blacks. Just make more silhouettes and it'll cover up your errors. That looks good. There, it's got a little bit of shadows that goes down. Okay, now we got the. Now I can do his front claw and work continually working to the right here. You see that? Okay, good. Again, pulling my lines. So I keep a smooth line. As I had that break where his claws, turns into the leg turns into the foot, and you get that nice bend there. I keep saying, pull your brush, but for some effects, you can push your brush, and you can really get some fun effects. If you can get some nice rough, feeling like that, and it's a little grittier feel to your inking line. It works real well when you're doing fur or doing feathers or things like that. So practice getting those effects too. But right now, I'm wanting smooth lines. I can even use the lines on the knuckles here as contour lines to show the curvature of the finger. They're not just straight, but a little bit of curve to them. And notice in there I put a little bit of a blackness between the toes, just a little bit of a shadow for some visual drama. I penciled that claw a little short. I can make that longer here. There. Okay, now I can get his other leg in here. It's kind of a cross between feather and fur. You know what? I think I can do a better job on that foot too. I think I lost some of the anatomy in that. See how on this one I've got this upper part of the hand, a nice little triangle shape in there, and the talons coming off of it. And I lost that there. If we can keep that feel and then put the talons there. There we go. Okay. Sorry, that's a little messy. I know what I'm going to be doing, so I will happily show you as I'm inking. I'm going to come up here and do a knuckle. And then how that talon is folded up. You can see all the wrinkles in the fingers as it's clutched behind him there. Make that back knuckle just really pointed just for the emphasis of it. Okay, almost done. Chest goes up into the belly. I'm not going to draw that line straight. I'm just going to make it do these little indentation, not really crosshatch, but just to not show a full line. I think it makes it feel more like there's flesh in there, not like it's a limb is overlapping the body. Now this is tricky right here, getting this paw looking like it's bent back. And draw the underside of these toes. Like so. We only see a couple of them. And draw this gets really detailed. Draw those little pads in there. If they were any bigger, I'd put the claws on there too, but it's so small. If I put too much detail, it's just going to get messy. And that will go against our idea of simplification. There. On this leg, I'm going to drop some blacks in like that and just sweep in some shadows. Now for the tail. Come off right off his rump. And then get thick again, a big tuft of hair on the end of his tail here. There, get it in the frame so you can see it. Do some dry brushing to make it look fluffy. There. Now, pull out again. There. Now, just to add some atmosphere, make him feel like he's in the air. I need a fine point. I have a fine point. Okay, so before I do that, I'm gonna draw these clouds first. I'm gonna draw a couple of clouds in here. I've got a fine point marker. I was going to do them after I erase the pencil lines, but some of that might still be wet, and if I erase the lines, it's going to smear all over. So let's draw some clouds, and I'm going to draw the clouds low on the page, because that, in my opinion, makes him feel like he's higher, if he's visually above the clouds, even though I know there are clouds way up here, but just when you see a line of clouds, there. Makes him feel like he's just soaring high in the sky. Now the idea about these clouds too, I'm doing different size puffs. So they're all randomized, a big one, a couple little ones, a medium sized one. There. Maybe even put a little, I think I did this when we did the superhero character in the last lesson on drawing people. Put some birds here in the background. Yeah. Now that makes him feel like he's really high up. There, so that is our Griffin in action, in ink, powerful in the sky, kind of comic book version. Let's go ahead and see if I can, oh good, it's dry. Now this would be fun to scan and color digitally. Since I've done them on sketch paper, I can't really use watercolors, and even markers would not. Well, they might work on this. But maybe we'll scan this and color it later. Erasing pencil lines here. I did get a little smear on his back foot, but when I scan it, I can easily erase that. Now, also I realized I failed to put some of these contour lines on this front leg, so let me do that. Just random little lines, one or two here and there. Don't do them all the same. Maybe a little circle in there, give it some little bumps. He's been through a lot. He's got some scars and stuff. So there we have it. Griffin number 2, Soaring in the Clouds. And you can take these designs, this model, and take what you've learned in the last drawing and this one, and do your own poses. Make him, sitting down. Make him running, or if they do run, rescuing somebody, or in a fight with another griffin. Let your imagination go. You don't have to just stop with the drawings I do. I want to encourage you to take these and the lessons you've learned and put them into your own artwork. Okay, and when you do, and you post it, tag me. I love to see your stuff online. All right, let's go on to something really exciting next. I've decided I think I really would like to color in this drawing of the Griffin. So let's get started on that. Now, whenever I've done these lessons before, I've always showed you a different way to transfer your drawing to watercolor paper. I know, because we usually work on sketch paper, and then I'll either ink it on the sketchbook, like in the sketchbook, like I did this, or we transfer it to watercolor paper. Sometimes I've just redrawn it, started from scratch. Sometimes I've used a light box, and traced it. This time I did something totally different, and I'm not showing you because it's boring. But I scanned my original drawing and took it into my computer and then printed it with a laser printer onto hot press watercolor paper. And I say a laser print. Laser printer. I did not use an inkjet printer. An inkjet printer won't work because the inkjet ink is water soluble, and if you put watercolor on top of that, it's going to smear it all. So if you have a laser printer, and you can do this. Now I used hot press paper because it's pretty thin, and it's about as thick as my printer will handle. Because sometimes you'll have to deal with the thickness of the paper through your printer. So you do a few test runs, and that's the beauty of it. You can run a few through until you get it just right. My original paper was 9 by 12. This is 8.5 by 11, so I had to shrink it down just a hair. Is there anything about that I need to say? Oh, and you also notice on this I have taken out the line I did for the clouds and the little birds I had flying up here, because I realized I want to do those in color. I don't want to leave that a black line separating the sky color from the white cloud. So I was able to erase that, and we'll put that back in when we paint. And then I've also, as you see, I've got this Masonite portable drawing board. It's got a clip on it. It's great for when you go out and you've got a tablet to working in on a location somewhere. You can clamp everything down. But I also use it when I'm working with watercolor. Something I know that the paper is going to get wet, because you have to, or you should tape your paper down, and because it'll warp. And if I'm working on a watercolor block, like you've seen me do before, I don't have to worry about it. Or if I'm not using a lot of water and just doing some spot color, it generally is not a problem. But just to make sure our bases are covered, I'm going to tape this down. In case I do a lot, big wash on this, I don't want it to warp. I'll get this, make sure I'm centered on camera. There. I can just take just the edge of it here. This is not pretty paint, but it's painter's tape. And what that does, it's not quite as sticky as some other tapes, so it won't peel up the surface of the paper when I take it off. And it holds it flat. And I'm also working on this board too, instead of taping it to my big drawing board, in case I need to turn the whole thing to make it more easy to get a spot. Now, taping your paper down is really important if you're doing a full watercolor and putting a wash over the whole thing and getting your paper really, really wet. Because your paper does warp when it gets wet. Here, getting it just over the edge too. I don't want to put too much on the paper. Save as much painting area as I can. All right, and I've got my paints. This is a Winsor & Newton Cotman set. It's like I've used before. I've got some scrap watercolor paper to test things on. I've got my paper towels. You've seen I've used these before. I've got my brushes. I've got my water. This, by the way, I wanted to show you guys. This is what I use for that holds my brushes in place. There we go. This is a brush basin. It holds water. It's got 3 sections in it, so it's got a little and a rough area to run your brushes across to rinse them, to wash them out and get the color out. It's got 2 reservoirs on either side to hold some clean water. It also has this little brush rest in there, so you can rest your brush in without touching the bottom of the can, because you don't want it to bend your bristles. I've had this for, my goodness, at least over 30 years, and it still works great. They're still available, they still make them, and they're fantastic. Again, it's called a brush basin. Highly recommend it if you're looking for something. Like I said, I have my paints ready. I'm going to spritz them with some water just to make them come alive, loosen them up a little bit. And I realize not everybody is going to have these available on your shelf. You may be working with something like this. This is just a simple set. I think I spent $1 on this at a department store, and not even an art supply store. It's very inexpensive, but it's an okay place to start. If this is all you have, use it. There are drawbacks. The color, the pigment is not as dense, so it's a little harder to get some vibrant colors. And also, they're not calibrated to last a long, long time. So you might find in 5-10 years, your picture has faded a bit. So these are not professional colors by any means, but they're cheap. And I have done some. In fact, I did a painting once. With these, just to prove you could do a nice painting with cheap paints. So if this is all you got, use it. But do get a better brush. The brushes that come with these, they stink. No 2 ways about it. All right, so let's start with our Griffin. Like we did in our original drawing, I wanted him flying high above the clouds. So I'm going to get my wide flat brush. You can see it's about 3/4 of an inch wide and very thin, so I can do fat swaths and do thin if I as well. So let's just start with just some clear water and paint in this sky. I'm not going to put the clouds exactly where I had them before, but close. And don't want that too wet. And again, this is going to be a wet on wet technique. And as you can see already, the water is not making this line, the black lines, fade or bleed or anything. That the toner that uses in these printers is very water resilient. And yet at the same time, you can't see it yet because I'm not painting on top. Sometimes it resists water and it beads up on top. So that's hasn't been a problem for me yet. And one thing I do like about using this method of using a printer to print your colors, print my lines out, is that if I make a big mistake, and I don't know, spill coffee on it or whatever, which I don't even drink coffee. But let's say somebody comes into my studio and says, "What you working on?" and they spill coffee all over my drawing. I'm not worried about it. I can print it out again and start all over. I've got the basis of it still there. So that is a benefit of doing it this way, using your printer. In fact, one year I made Christmas cards that way. I did one drawing and I printed them out onto cardstock, and then I hand watercolored very lightly, just a few pieces, just a few little dots of spot color here and there. And I made, I don't know, 50 Christmas cards that way. Yes, it was time consuming, but everybody got something that was a little bit original that year. I like doing original art and sending it through the mail. I like sending postcards to people. You can usually do one pretty quick, just a quick little illustration on a piece of watercolor paper, 4 inches by 6 inches, something like that. Put a stamp on it, send that to a friend or a family member. They love it. I'm going to use a smaller brush to get the edge of my clouds, and I'm kind of holding it up to the light so I can see where it's wet. Doing some big circles and little circles. Make those clouds look fluffy. It's like working with invisible ink right now. Oh, you have to work fast as well, because by the time I'm finished with this side, the other side of the paper is all dried up. Still damp. And I'm letting this these talons that are open, dip below the line of the clouds. And the other side is above the clouds. There. I think that's going to do it. Still, it's a little bit dry in places, but we'll make it work. And I'm using this sky blue. Over here is a very light cerulean blue. Yeah. Kidding. And the paper is still a little bit wet, so if I don't get quite up to that line, hopefully the paper will be damp enough to let the water and let the color bleed over and come up right up to the line. You can also see at the top of this drawing, it didn't print to the edge. There's two reasons on that. One is my original sketch, I didn't. His wing went to the edge of the paper, so there's nothing drawn there. But printers can't print all the way to the edge of the sheet. I'm having to look slanted at my paper to see what's wet. Here, that's how I'm holding my head crooked, trying to see the reflection in the light. I start with the background first for two reasons. One, it just makes sense to start with what is farther away, and to then paint the things closer, so you can, anything that's close you paint on top of the background. And also, there's just a bit of lack of confidence, because if I mess up the background, if I do it now, it's okay. I haven't spent all my time working on the details of my main subject. And I thought of a third reason that holds true on most watercolor art, but not all. You know, it is the preferred method to work from light to dark with watercolors, because you're, being a transparent medium, and most often your background is lighter and your foregrounds are darker. So if you're doing just a nature scene or something, you're going to be starting in there in your background, and it's going to be a lighter colors than your foreground. Now that happens for mostly because of what's called atmospheric diffusion, because there's just air and there's dust in the air, and as things get farther away from us, they look lighter because there's more matter between us and them, whether it's just the thickness of the air on a real hazy day, there's dust, there's whatever. So that's why mountains that are far away from us look kind of gray, sometimes kind of purple, depending on the light. But when you get up close, those rocks are gray and dark, very dark. Okay. That looks pretty good. Worked really fast, got it done. Now we can have fun with the Griffin himself. I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to dry the background off with my hairdryer. Now that I've dried the background off, you can see, maybe, I'm not sure, I'm going to hold it at an angle. See, the paper's still just a little bit warped from the water, as we expected. But just to give you a sense of that. Now, if I hadn't had it taped down, it would be curling up all over, and then you'd get these dips where the water, the water we put down now would pool and puddle, and it would make colors very uneven. That's why we want it as flat as possible, so we can control that. Let's see. Is that my number 8 brush? It's hard to tell. My 6. This is a number 6 watercolor brush. This isn't one of my real nice ones, but it's a good one. Watercolor brushes can be very, very expensive depending on what brand you get. And I'm going to start at the top and work down. Again, so I don't rake my hand over through something I've just painted, and also because with watercolor, and we're being on probably about between a 5 and a 10 degree angle here, you're going to get that, and the water is going to just work down by gravity. And I'm going to give our Griffin friend some nice golden wings. He's going to be mostly golden in nature. I'm going to try to get some other colors in here too, because I don't want to just be brown. Yeah, that's a good, just this yellow ochre that comes with it. I'm starting off with that, and I'll be mixing some other colors with it as too, getting a little bit darker on the edge of his wings. Okay, so let's just quickly dab in some color here. With these dark shadows we've created, we kind of have made a quasi-comic book look to it. That's kind of cool. I don't want the wings to be the same color as his lion body, that tawny yellow for a lion. So I'm gonna put a few different colors on his wings. I'm just starting off with this gold as a base color. And in doing so, it helps tie all the colors together. There's a commonality between everything. If you try to choose different colors, sometimes it just looks like they don't really match. Like when you close your eyes while you're picking out your clothes in the morning. So I want the colors to feel like they're all in the same family. So I'm putting that yellow. Now that's going to be pretty much the color of his body as well, the lion body. But we're starting off with you know what would be better than gold on here, just to make it a little bit different. Let's go a little bit off the beaten path. Let's go a little bit magenta. Magenta is in the purple family, obviously, so it's kind of on the opposite. It's a complementary color to the yellow. And once I get it over that yellow, it's going to turn a little bit gray, so it's not going to be a bright purple, he's not going to look like a parrot, but it just pulls the wings a little bit with a different look than the rest of his body, because we want it to be obvious that he's made up of more than one character, one of the more than one creature. A little bit darker and more vivid toward the end of his feathers, and then there. Oh yeah. And if I didn't like it, I'll print out another one. Now this other wing, since it's the back, we're seeing the back side of the wing, we can make most of that, we can keep it up, all that purpley yellow color. Now this magenta that I'm using is pretty vivid by itself, but once I get it over that tawny yellow ochre, it's got a different feel. It desaturates it, brings it down just a little bit. Now once we get next to the yellow, when we paint the ochre, when we paint his body, it'll feel a little more vivid. But I don't want him to look like a parrot or anything too vibrant. Just a personal choice. I'm sure he'd look great if he had a very vibrant coloring. Now I'm painting, even though where the lines end on the top, you can see I'm painting beyond there as if those feathers kept going out, for no real reason other than I wanted to. Because if I were to mat this and frame it, I would make sure the mat covered up, where he went off the screen there, or off the page, off the screen. I do a lot of storyboarding, so I think of my images as looking through a camera most of the time. I think these undercut, this other section needs a different color too, so it's not too much like the lion. I wonder if we could go just a little bit, kind of a bluish brown. I don't want it to turn green. If I mix a little bit of that blue and some purple, what will I get? That's what these good, that test strips are good for. You can see what color is going to look like. I don't want it to get too dark. It should be just a little bit lighter than that magenta I used. But push it a little bit toward the yellow, toward the blue. This is a phthalo blue. It's very, very vibrant. Yeah, that's gonna look good. A little bit of magenta, a little bit of the phthalo blue. but just a little bit. And then we'll let it blend back to the yellow. Okay, going over that yellow, we're losing some of the blue. It's going kind of gray, so I need to beef it back up a little bit. There. And then back with some just plain clear water to let that blend. There, I think that's working. Fill up that little area. Okay, I'm going to do the inside of his mouth before I do the beak. Just with a very, I'm going to mix some, I have this rose madder red. It didn't come in the set. I filled that up later with a tube of paint I bought. That's what I do like about these sets with the dried paint in pans. You can refill them by getting a tube of paint in any color you want and refill them and make your own palette of colors. This rose madder is just beautiful. It's a shame I'm using it just in this little area. And even though this is a small area, I'm still using this thick brush. And just with practice, you learn to control that tip and get it very narrow. It needs to be a little darker on top. So I'm going to get a little ultramarine blue and just dot it right there across the top, kind of giving it a shadow. And it's still wet, so it'll slowly bleed out and blend. Okay. That looks like it's dry enough. Let's get his beak. I'm going to start with a little bolder yellow than his feathers. Get this bright yellow beak here. I might have to. I didn't leave enough room for a highlight. I'll have to put that on top with some white, something opaque. And I'm going to. Well, I got that all wet. I'm going to put some darker color on the end of his beak. Just to let that bleed. I like it when. There we go. You know how some birds of prey have a darker area on the end of their beak? Gonna try and get that effect here. Yeah, and it really makes it. I did leave enough room for a white highlight there. And it does, and it makes that highlight feel that much stronger when it's got a little more contrast. So I'm using kind of a reddish brown on the end of his beak there. Now the inside of his mouth is dry enough. I can put some pink on that tongue. Now let's start with those feathers around his head. Again, I have to think ahead. I want his body to be golden, so I want something that works well with that, but feels like it's in the same family. And of course his talons are going to be kind of gold too. Let's go something not like I don't want a bald like a white like a bald eagle has, because then it's I just not using the color. I want to use something that's a bit colorful. So let's get kind of a grayed blue. Let's take some ultramarine over here. But I don't want it too bright. Like I said, I don't want to pair it, but I can get some Payne's gray in here too. A little bit more like an osprey is colored. You know, ospreys have that kind of a silvery white feathers around their head. Of course, they have some dark markings as well. Maybe we'll put some of those in. A little more water. It's a little dark. There. And I'm leaving that edge on the top, giving some highlight there, and playing with it, just leaving some feathery texture there too. You see how I'm leaving darks and lights together? And I can adjust how thick that paint is by how much water I'm mixing with it. I can get it very transparent, or have a little more hue with it. A little more shadow under his eye like that. Now, since I've gone with a little bit of the blue family, it really makes that yellow of the beak pop out a little more. Yeah, graying your color down a little bit and learning how to control how vibrant it is can really make your colors sing, because very few things are that vibrant in real life. And yes, this is a cartoon, but we want it to have a certain amount of basis in reality. So if you are able to tone down some of your colors by mixing, making it a little more gray, like mixing actual gray with that blue, it makes the other colors look that much brighter, so you can focus where you want the attention to be and what colors you want brighter. Okay, let's go ahead and do his lion body here. I'm going back to this my tawny yellow. Feels all very liony. Oh, I got to make sure that fore limb has fur and feathers mixing together, so I want to make sure I keep that. And I don't paint the whole thing yellow. It is a lot faster, I think, to paint digitally, and certainly a lot easier to correct mistakes. But maybe it was just because I have so much more experience doing it this way. I really like working with real watercolors. Making this tuft at the end of his tail just a little bit darker. In fact, I'm going to mix this reddish brown with it too, just to give it a little bit of that hair texture, mostly near the end. We can make the end really dark. I'll get some umber in here. I think I might even need to get it real dark, need some blue. If you mix ultramarine blue and a burnt umber, you get a really dark, rich black. But the beauty of it is when you thin it, it's not, just neutral gray. It's got some vibrance in it too. When you get a little bit lighter, it's a more pleasing black to me. There. Now we can work some shadows on that body. Get a little bit of blue for the shadows, mix it in with that that yellow. A little shadow under here where his wing will be casting a shadow across his body. And generally on just all the undersides, because if the sun's on top, casting its light down, all the shadows are going to be on the bottom. There. And I think I'm going to put a little more shadow under that wing. Now that the colors have dried out a little bit more and they get a little lighter. Again, I'm mixing a little bit of blue with my ochre to get a nice shadow color. There. And go back to my feather color, that ultramarine with some gray in it. Get those shadows those feathers that are on his legs here. You can see where they kind of blend into the fur. There. Almost done. I'm going to start his talons, but while I'm doing that, I'm thinking about his eye. His eye looks a little pale there. I know most of our eyes are white, but I think maybe he needs a bit of color in there. Sometimes I like to make the whites of the eye a light blue or a yellow or a green. Let's think about that while we're working on his talons. Now again, I'm going to use the same bright yellow that I did on his beak, so it looks a little bit, make sure it looks significantly different than his fur. I've got 3 shades, well, including the ochre, I've got 4 shades of yellow on here. Got like a lemon yellow, then a straight cadmium yellow, and this is, I think it's cadmium yellow deep. So when you're not painting your drawings in, it's a good idea just to have fun and experiment and see what the different colors do when you mix them together, what other colors you can get. There. That dries pretty quickly. I'm going to give him some dark toenails. I'm going to use my gray. I don't want him to go all the way black. And very carefully paint those in. It's a deep, deep gray, and leaving a little bit of a highlight on each one. They're shiny, razor sharp talons. See a little bit of a talon back in there. And now that's almost dry, I can put a little bit of other color. I need a smaller brush too. I'm going to use this is a Winsor Newton Series 7. It's a sable brush. It's one of my better ones. So I'm going to use the same kind of reddish brown color I had on his beak, just to echo that same color combination. I'm running out of palette space here. There we go. Again, just using that for some shadow areas. Try not to get it too dark. There. I can enhance some of those little black lines we put for the wrinkles, little irregularities and blemishes and bumps in his skin. There. Now overall too, you notice how remember I erased that that black line that separated the clouds from the sky. It looks a lot better just having a smooth, less contrast in that. So you don't have this black line running across there. If it's just a black and white drawing, it looks fine. But yeah, that looks a lot nicer that way. I'll try that. Got a little bit out of the lines there. I'm going to see if I can walk that back a little. There we go. I had a little bit of paint coming on just over the edge of his beak. And yeah, I do think I need his eyes a different color. I'm going to leave that little highlight white, but I'm going to use this lemon yellow. This is a very light lemon yellow right here. I'm going to use that for his eye, but not by itself. We're going to have a tone change. I'm going to start with this yellow. You see that, and then I have a little lime green I'm going to put on the top and let that, while it's still wet, and let those two colors blend, so we'll get a gradient from green to yellow. And while that's drawing, one final little thing that you may have forgotten about, but I sure didn't. Yeah, some of you remember the birds that were in the background. I didn't want those to be so dark, because like I said, things in the distance and they get a little bit grayer and lighter in color. So I'm going to use just some plain gray paint here, and very thin, so just it's very light. And see that, and you can already tell, making them that much lighter makes them feel that much farther away too. Okay. So there, I think we're finished. I know our Griffin is done. Got some nice, we played with a lot of color gradients in here. We played with a nice variant in the palette and getting some reds and golds and blues all together, but making it feel like it's all part of the same animal. So I think we can sign it. So let's put, I'm going to use a not too dark of a watercolor. I don't want my name to be the center of attention. So there we go. We are done. And one of the most fun things to do when you finish a watercolor, when it's taped down this way, is to peel the paint off. And the last piece. You have to be very careful too. I want to make sure when you're peeling paint off, always peel the direction away from the painting, because yes, even though this tape is not supposed to tear the paper, once in a while it does, and you don't want to get a little piece of paper and tear into your painting. So if it tears the paper now, it's going to just rip it, take the surface off away from the painting. But we're very lucky. It worked like it's supposed to. I throw this tape away, and we have a finished Griffin. Fun painting. Thanks for joining me on that. Okay, let's move on to something else. Hey everybody, Tim Hodge here. and I wanted to tell you about a new drawing program I've been working on, and I'm really excited about it. I think you will be too. It's how to draw cartoon mythical creatures. I'm going to take you through how to draw unicorns, how to draw Pegasi, you know, the horses with wings. And we're going to draw centaurs, we're going to draw dragons, we're going to draw mermaids and griffins. We're going to draw a lot of stuff, and I think you'll be really pleased with it. I'm really excited about it. It's going to come out real soon, so stay tuned. That's Tim Hodge's How to Draw Cartoon Mythical Creatures here on creatureartteacher.com. But that's not all. If you pre-order or order during the first month of release, we're going to put your name into a drawing. And at the end of the month, we're going to draw one lucky person's name out of a hat. And that person will win this original Blue Mermaid that I drew for the course. So you're going to learn how to draw this during the course, but one lucky person is going to win it. I will mail it anywhere in the world. All right? So order now, enter your name into the drawing, tell your friends, and we're going to have great fun. Keep drawing, everybody.